So I'm going to read a portion of what he was going to talk to you about the Memorial Day. My father was on a Coast Guard cutter during World War II, which some of you know. It was called the Modoc. All right, this was written by a man who, his name was Eugene O'Brien, who was actually on a similar ship to my father's in the North Atlantic where they patrolled, called the USS Emporia. And so here's the story. And my father really liked this story because it takes place on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1944, and it takes place in the North Atlantic Ocean, where my father was always patrolling during the war, looking for German subs and different, enemy ships. So he liked this story, and he was going to read this to you. So I'll do the best I can. The ship is under the command of an executive officer, Lieutenant Robert Kastner. The captain remained ashore this time because he was very sick. The Weather, Rescue, and Anti-Submarine Patrol Station number 9 is located approximately 200 miles east of Cape Farewell in Greenland. The 8 to midnight watch is on war cruising status, means they're looking for the enemy. The North Atlantic is one of its typical December moods. It's in one of its typical December moods. And my father always talked about how bad the North Atlantic Ocean is during, the winter and the storms. Think about the Titanic if you want to. The sea swells are mountainous. The ship is more under the sea than it is on top. The wind howls continually. The superstructure is coated with ice. From time to time, St. Elmo's Spire runs along the mast and other riggings. I had to look up St. Elmo's Spire. Does anybody know what that is? Yes, Eric? What is it? You want to explain it?
It's an electrical current that's created by weather that dances along the mast.
The mast of the lines, right? Yeah, electrical current. Okay, so every on occasion you'd see that running along the lines of the ship. The crew has just finished an hour of breaking ice from the starboard side. The gigantic swells have no set direction. The engines are making turns for 10 knots, just keeping the bow into the sea. 5 days later, the weather broke, and there was a sighting was taken, and the ship was actually 12 miles further back than what she was supposed to be. Thank God for the Great Lakes shipbuilders, because the hull remained sound. Not one to the thousands of welds split open in any capacity. The splinter shield around the number 1.3-inch gun is laid flat. The ready ammunition box holding 24 Hedgehog anti-submarine rockets were torn from the deck and driven down to the supports of the signal bridge. 2 hands with lifelines drop over the 20-millimeter gun tubs located just outside the wheelhouse, and they lift each rocket from the racks and keep them back over the side. Lifelines are rigged from the bridge ladder back to the weather shack. All hands on watch are hanging on for dear life. The 3-inch ready gun crew is lucky. They can take shelter in the clipping room located just forward and under the wheelhouse. The 40-millimeter crews have only the gun mounts and the engine room exhaust vents to cling on to. Everyone is soaked and everyone is frozen numb. My station is this Eugene O'Brien. My station is the telephone talker and lookout on the starboard 40-millimeter amidships. The ship is having a very hard time keeping the bow into the sea. Only with the aid of the engine is the bow kept on. At one time, the wheelhouse actually takes green water through a forward porthole, which was not secured as they thought it was to be. What a great surprise to the helmsman and the quartermaster on watch there when the water came in. The officer of the deck and the bridge talker are bounced around the flying bridge. There was no seatbelts back then. Wind baffles and the port and starboard bridge lookouts are flung from their little buckets and end up on the signal bridge. If you saw the Titanic, there's two guys looking in these buckets on the top that oversee the actual, they spot the iceberg from it. Well, they're thrown all around, if you can imagine that, because of the weather. Everyone has bruises and black eyes. Some people are sick, throwing up. The red badge of courage for the North Atlantic PF sailors should be given. This particular storm lasted 7 days. There was no let-up. Each time the bow breaks the surface after one of its subterranean plunges, it leaps into the air and comes down with a resounding roar. The ship shudders from stem to stern. The galley is useless. The only thing they had to eat were cold cuts and some coffee. About mid-watch, Lieutenant Robert Thayer, the assistant first lieutenant, appears at my side and instructs me to accompany him to the bridge. We are going to relieve the helm lookouts and talker every hour, for they are so exhausted and cannot function. I turn the phones over to a Liberty and shipmate by the name of Raymond Knowles, Fire Patrolman, 3rd class. He's from Plymouth, Massachusetts. My last words to him are, Ray, don't leave the mount. Keep a tight lifeline. The seas are breaking over the main deck here. Be very careful. Lieutenant Thayer and I wait for an opportunity on his signal to make a mad dash along the lifelines to the bridge ladder, up the side of the wardroom to the next level. The wheelhouse, captain C cabin, and the chart radar room are located here. And as we reach the top, just as we reach the top, a gigantic swell engulfs the whole ship from the stack to the fantail. Lieutenant Thayer remarked, "Thank God, we made it. Another minute and you and I would be gone forever." I relieve the helm, and together with a first-class quartermaster by the name of Charles Pearston from Boston, we try to keep the ship pointed in the right direction. I on the wheel, and he on the engine order telegraphs. Just then, I heard the bridge talker tell Ensign John Roberts, the ship's communications officer, that he could not raise the starboard side midships lookout for this periodic check. Nobody answered. My heart skipped a beat because that was my shipmate and friend, Ray Knowles, that we were just talking to and that we had left. The boatswain of the watch was Delizo from Chicago. Minutes later, he returned to the bridge to report that the lookout, Ray Knowles, was gone. He was carried over the side by that huge wave. His body had broken 2 cable life rails and snapped the telephone cables. There was no thought of turning the ship on the man overboard call because there was no possibility that they would find him and the ship could capsize if caught in a swell or even swamp. And they had to take into consideration the safety of the ship and the crew aboard. So turning around was not an option. Every inch of the fantail deck was searched to no avail. Days later, the ship returned to the area to find nothing. God spared the ship and the crew, and in true U.S. Coast Guard fashion, the mission was completed. The ship suffered extensive sea damage to the weather decks. There was many a teary eye on the mess deck that night, and not all from salt spread. He was our first casualty. Ray Knowles gave his life for his country, just the same as it would have been from enemy fire. No ship or sailor will ever defeat the sea. Lieutenant Thayer emptied Reynolds' locker, and he packed his sea bag to be shipped home to his family. Myself and another shipmate from Bill Hayden from Worcester, Massachusetts, we were there. Ray and Bill often played games together. Bill Hayden's peg scoreboard was in Ray's locker. He didn't have the courage to ask Lieutenant Thayer for it when it appeared. Every Christmas at midnight Mass, I remember this incident, and I remember Ray Knowles' smiling face. As I reflect, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Can you just imagine that Christmas message received by the Knowles family that week? His mother, his father, his sister. The Secretary of the Navy regrets to inform you. Thank you. I do remember one thing. I do remember my father telling the story where he was almost lost. And there was a storm that he was supposed to go on watch, and as he opened the door, the ship tilted this way, flew him out the door, and he hit the lifeline right near his belly. And as he was going over,